Anyone who's ever done anything worth doing has dreamed big, failed mightily, and mostly started from humble beginnings. This is a podcast about such people. The most fascinating podcast in the world is fascinating because of the stories of the human beings. Hello, everybody. It's Pat DiCerbo, the most fascinating podcast in the world. The reason it's fascinating, at least in my opinion, is because of the people that agree to speak to me. Today we're with Paul Glynn Sr. Paul is a senior executive at Stryker. It's a well-known, very large company that makes devices that go in the human body, like joints, I believe, hips, knees, elbows, shoulders, stuff like that. Paul can tell us more. But without me going down that road too far, welcome, Paul. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Pat. Happy to be here.
That's terrific. So as you know, I am in the habit of asking people about their childhood first. It's instructive, at least to me. And I wondered, I think you said you grew up in eastern Iowa. I wondered, what are your earliest memories from growing up?
Yeah, well, I came from a family of 10 kids, and I was number 9 on that list. So it was an Irish Catholic family, born in 1963 with 8 older brothers and sisters and 1 younger. So earliest memories is probably just chaos around the house. It was a hardworking mom and dad. They probably were working 80 hours a week to 100. My dad had a bar and restaurant. My mom worked as a secretary for the government. And she also worked at the restaurant as well as all of us too, doing odds and ends things. But growing up with a very loving family, a great mom and dad, where we had a lot of fun, discipline was instilled for sure, and everything was done together. We did our chores together, we ate together. Hey, I didn't get my own bed until age 10. So we slept together. We did about everything together that you could imagine. And sports was a big part of our life, but not necessarily wrestling. It was, baseball, it was football. And not all my brothers wrestled. But my closest brother in age and I got involved between the 4th and 5th grade summers of 1972. Is when I found the sport of wrestling. But it was a loving family, hardworking parents, and we were cooking our own meals at age 5, 6, and 7. If you wanted to learn how to eat, you had to be resourceful around the kitchen.
What was your specialty?
BLT, bacon, lettuce, and tomato. I don't think anybody has that. Toast a piece of bread in the toaster, throw some bacon on the oven, chop up some lettuce and tomatoes, and you could eat 5 of those.
Is there a better sandwich in the world than that? I love BLTs.
It's a lost art. That was a great sandwich back in the 70s and 80s. Throw a little mayonnaise on there too.
Me too. But I like it on either toasted rye or toasted Italian bread.
Yeah. You got either way, you have to toast it, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
For me.
You can't do just bread. It's got to be toasted bread.
And I do like a turkey club, but I very light on the turkey, just a little couple slices of turkey with the bacon and the lettuce and then the tomato. But like a normal club sandwich, a big fat one, that's too much for me. I don't like that. Takes away from the bacon.
That's what makes a BLT kind of a little lighter, a little less heavy. That's why you could eat 5 of them.
Exactly. So your earliest memories, age 5 or before that?
Yeah, I would say easily 5. We did all those things. We did a lot with family. We had a lot of cousins. My dad was one of 7. My mom was one of 6. So all local. I mean, everything local. So Sunday morning breakfast after church was an ordeal. It was a 2-hour ordeal, but everything was done together. It was relatively small town. So you did your Friday night football games, Friday night lights was a big deal. Community came and watched everything. It was a relatively 20,000 folks that lived in Bettendorf at the time in eastern Iowa. But I was blessed to grow up with great parents, great teachers, great community, and we all pulled together. So learning the aspects of being, a great teammate was instilled easily in those early years of 5 through 10, and doing everything together too, right? Just learning how you don't have to go through life alone because you had all these people and resources that were plugging into you.
I like it.
Simpler times, right? Bike rides out in the country that you would ride 3 miles out in the country.
Mm-hmm.
You thought you were 500 miles away, right? No traffic lights, exploring some barn or cornfield, thinking we were, Huck Finn back in the days when you were 7, 8, 9, 10, riding your bikes. It felt free and it felt easy. No social media, the drill. Simpler times.
Yeah. Well, you rode our bikes everywhere. Fishing, tennis, even golf when I got older. But
I was just going to say, we threw a lightweight golf bag on our shoulder. We threw our fishing poles on our shoulder. We threw our baseball bats on our shoulder, and you biked everywhere.
yeah.
Literally everywhere.
Yeah. So you played baseball growing up or no?
I did through freshman year.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But fourth grade, between fourth and fifth grade, you were introduced to the sport of wrestling.
Yep. It was hooked at first bite. For the very first practice. This was awesome, right?
Really?
Yeah. Yep.
Wow.
And I was blessed because this was 72, but I had a high schooler who was about a sophomore, between sophomore and junior year. And he had a wrestling mat in his basement, and he had weights in his basement and ankle weights. And he was a big fan of like Prefontaine, and so he ran a lot. And he was the first that introduced me like year-round training before it became a thing, even nutrition before it became a thing. So I just bought into it. I bought into every aspect of dedication, commitment, and wrestling was fighting legally, right? You could go to the wrestling room and compete and scrap and not get sent to the principal's office. So it was amazing.
Right.
It was
I
amazing.
remember reading an article when I was around that age about wrestling and football. It was like a psychology article, but it was probably in Sports Illustrated. But they were both described as controlled violence.
There's some truth to that. And I played football through 8th grade, but at 4'11" and 78 pounds, and everybody was hitting puberty in 7th and 8th grade except for me.
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden, size became 150 pounders against a 78 pounder, and size and speed. Through 8th grade, it was evident that okay, we probably got to start specializing into wrestling just based on size.
Got it.
I didn't know that at the time, but my coaches knew that, and they kind of started directing me to specialize. Because the football coach and the wrestling coach were one and the same. So got directed into wrestling singularly once I got to high school.
So you said you were hooked from the first moment. What hooked you? Was it that controlled violence thing, or what was it?
It was just the pure competition of your buddies, right? So think about your 3 or 4 buddies that you would go play baseball with or go play football with, and you hang out with, and then they put some shoes on you and a mat, and they're like, okay, we're going to play King of the Ring. If you get the takedown, you stay out. And then the next person comes in, and the next person comes in, the next person comes in, and you're winning against your buddies. That was addiction to me. That was a powerful drug. And, I think just being competitive, right? Where in baseball, playing against your buddies, you might be out in the outfield and you might not get a ball hit to you for an hour, and so if you wanted to compete, you can compete. As you know, in wrestling, practice is like a match, maybe unlike every other sport. You go to a football game on Friday night, yes, you're putting 70 or 80 plays together where you're competing, but in the practice situation, it's not always that. You might be doing drills, but in wrestling, when you really get to go one on one, 30-second goes, 1 minute goes, you're getting 30 or 40 matches in a practice, short matches in, where you're either winning or losing. So that just, that fueled me, whether I knew it, and I loved it. It was amazing.
Interesting. Did you have any tournaments at that point, or
I had a
of?
summer tournament. I remember everything. I remember how many matches I wrestled my first 12 months. It was 22 matches. I was 14-8, not tremendously great. My first tournament was that summer between fourth and fifth grade. I got second in Sterling, Illinois, and lost to a Sterling kid that I wanted revenge on for the next 12 years, but could never find him again.
We can find him with all the social media. We should hunt him down. I want a piece of this.
Yeah. Picture of us on a stand where he's number one and I'm number two.
You still have it?
I do, in a scrapbook somewhere. Yeah, it's alive somewhere. Yes.
Well, we should digitize it.
Put it out on social media and say, okay, who is this guy?
Most wanted, rematch wanted.
Yeah.
I think you could take him.
Yeah, I follow him enough to know that he didn't continue on in the sport past junior high, right?
Oh, you would crush him now, no doubt about it.
I was searching for him, but yeah, so I remember that. And then my second year, which was sixth grade, I think it was more like 70 something and one, maybe. So,
oh my gosh!
So I caught on, but I was practicing then, which was very uncommon. I got 2 full summers of wrestling and wrestling in the off season. So by the time I got to sixth grade, I had wrestled in the summer of fourth grade and summer of fifth grade with a small group of basement gang members. There weren't summer tournaments except for one maybe in Sterling, Illinois, but that's where the gains were made. And that's where, wrestling's a technique sport. So when you're learning technique, you become pretty dangerous at that age, especially when nobody else was doing it. So then the gains hooked you, right? You went from 14-8 to like whatever, 70 something in 1 or 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like, okay, this work ethic in, results out matter. So then it just fueled you to keep working harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun stuff.
So then what happened? You're in sixth grade. I need to know about middle school.
Oh, fun times back then. Sixth, seventh, eighth grade. We were a relatively small town, but we had a class of 400 people. So that's not a small class.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly, there's about 20 of us that we still stay in, 20 guys that we still stay in constant contact with. And we get together once a year. And a lot of my buddies were very good football and basketball players, or baseball. A couple of them wrestled, maybe as their third sport. Very few of them wrestled as their primary sport. So sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, I was probably on the hyper side of hyper. I was probably on, I'm sure my teachers both loved me, and I was probably a little bit, I was both high energy, but sweet, but competitive. I wasn't a jerk, or, I was never labeled any of that bully jerk. I wasn't that type of kid, but I was a very energetic kid and very hyper. And I just had sports as a nice release, right? So my friends would remember me as the guy that was always jumping on them, always trying to pick a wrestling match out of a football game, right? If I can't beat you in football, hey, let's wrestle.
Right.
But I had a lot of friends, and weirdly too, our friends started getting into physical fitness well before this became a fad. So we started working out in the mornings together. Again, now that's very common. 50 years ago, even more than 50 years ago, it wasn't a thing, but we had a very athletic class that finished second in the state and first in wrestling, second in football, second in swimming. We were a very athletic class, and I just palled around with all of them. We competed at everything, and if I couldn't beat them in a sport other than wrestling, then I tried to get them into the wrestling room.
Got it.
Right. Decent grades. Not the smartest guy in the room necessarily, but took care of my grades. And I had an older sister, Pat, that really gets a lot of credit, because if you're an Irish Catholic family growing up in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it's very common that the oldest sister never gets married because she becomes like a second mom, because the mom and dad are working so many hours to put food on the table. And she was like Mary Poppins. She was a really major force in my life. She's the one that took you to practice, drove you to practice, made sure you did your homework. She gets as much credit as anybody. So salute to Peggy Glynn.
What's Peggy up to?
She's 72, I think, and she's retired now, but she stayed in the family restaurant business. And then when that got bought out, she ran the restaurant up until a few years ago. I think she retired at 68. And she does what she did for me with a lot of her great nieces and nephews. I mean, she's very actively involved in their lives, babysitting, going to their events. Kind of hasn't changed a bit, just changes the generation. She just, every time there's a 1 to 7-year-old, they know Aunt Peggy pretty well.
And did she ever marry or no?
Nope. But I think she feels like she's got 20 kids.
It's so interesting.
Big part of our life growing up, for sure. I don't know if I'd be here if it wasn't for her.
So of the 9 siblings?
Yep.
Are they all living?
We have 8 of the 10 of us are still living. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And are they all in Iowa?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah,
Okay.
They are. Yep. Most of them within a few miles of where we grew up at. So on every Wednesday night, it's open Wednesday night at my sister Peggy's, where they have dinner, and it switches what type of dinner every Wednesday night, but it's a drop-in Wednesday.
Wow.
And it could be anywhere from 15 to 35 relatives dropping in.
That's
every
fantastic.
Wednesday, except for maybe Christmas or Thanksgiving.
What a nice tradition.
It really, here's the other thing. You know what family is when you grow up in an environment like that. And, my mom basically had one rule, which was no politics ever. So we're not going to talk politics ever. And, seniority wins. So even to this day, at Christmas or Thanksgiving, I'm at the kids' table with my little sister. And the only way you graduate to the adult table, because there's just not enough room, is if somebody dies. We're not rooting for that. So no matter how long I've been going to these dinners, my wife, my sister, and our spouses were at the kids' table.
That's
seniority matters.
That's great. Now, are either of your parents still living, or
my mom passed away in November at age 96.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and she stood true to that rule. No, we weren't going to argue, and we weren't going to get into politics. That you take that out of the mix, you reduce a lot of fights.
Yeah, I'm guilty of bringing it up. I was joking around about it. They had all these protests around the country last few days, and I said, I don't think the King's protest is fair to Elvis. That's all I said.
Fair enough.
I got reprimanded for that.
I'm sure.
But so you were a successful high school wrestler. Were you a state champion yourself?
Yeah,
in addition,
we had a very good state. Bednorf was a great program with a Hall of Fame coach named Frank Freeman, who was second and fourth in the NCAA tournament for UNI, the teacher school of University of Northern Iowa. And he became a Hall of Fame wrestling coach. So I was, I wrestled varsity as a freshman, was the most valuable wrestler for Bettendorf as a freshman.
Wow.
I was in the traditional high school state tournament. I was second as a junior, first as a senior, and the freestyle and Greco-Roman to go to like what is now called Fargo and junior nationals. I was third, fifth, and sixth in the country in high school. So I was a 3-time All-American, and won 3 state Greco titles and a state freestyle title as well. And our team were state champions our senior year as well.
Mm. So how did Dan Gable find you?
Well, the state of Iowa, you kind of know if you're in Iowa and you're any good, you know you can get on the map by your performance, right? So Gable found me by my success that I had at the junior freestyle level and then at the high school regular season level. Back then, you couldn't get recruited or contacted until your senior year, but your senior year, the fall of your senior year, there's a certain date where you could get contacted. So probably through letters or a call, I got a call and went up for a couple football games where they got you tickets and you could bring 4 U plus 3 to a football game, and you could do that twice. And you would watch the practice or try to put some wrestling shoes on and maybe roll around with some college kids. And then he came and watch a couple meets that I wrestled in person. And it was like, oh, Dan Gable's here. He's in the audience somewhere. And you'd get tipped off, that he's there to watch you. And you wanted to make sure, you perform. You're going to perform well anyway. You didn't have to have Gable in the audience to want to go out and win and do your best. But it added a little spice, a little awareness to go out and, be the best version of yourself. And then once the season ended and I won the state championship, then it was the recruiting trip to Iowa, that kind of sealed the deal.
Did you I assume you got a scholarship and he said, we want you on the team?
Oh, fun story, Pat. This is where now we're going to have fun with this podcast. All right. Yes and no. So no scholarship. I had at least 5 full ride Division I scholarships offered to me.
Where'd you get offers? Do you remember?
Yeah, Illinois, Nebraska, Drake, New Mexico, and I'm drawing a blank on the 5th one with that. So, there was a I don't know if it was Cornell. It wasn't a scholarship. It was a recruiting trip. I didn't take it. Somewhere in the it wasn't Harvard. It might have been Brown or Cornell. I don't think they do scholarships though, but it was a recruiting trip that I didn't take.
Okay.
I took one recruiting trip. It was the University of Iowa. I grew up with a very strong Irishman father, right? He was a tank driver in World War II. He rolled into Germany with Patton. And to the folks that he tended bar to, allegedly, he did a lot of bragging on me. But in person, father to son, there wasn't a lot of bragging to me to him, right? Or him to me. So in other words, he was your traditional, maybe a little hard-nosed. The hugs and I love you weren't necessarily everyday vocabulary per se. And, maybe you felt it a little bit more on like what you didn't do versus what you did do, right? To some degree. So where it gets interesting is I didn't realize what money was growing up. And I had a bed to sleep on. I had parents that loved me. We went shopping once a year. If you remember these days, you went like the week before school started and your mom bought you your 4 pairs of pants and your 6 shirts, and that's what you wore for a year. So I had no understanding of money.
Mm-hmm.
I worked at the restaurant, doing some odds and end things, cleaning on Sundays, making some food preparation, but, got the $5 allowance a week and never had a car. We went on one vacation a year for 2 days to St. Louis to watch baseball as the kids piled into 2 cars. So I had what I needed and never really understood money at all, right? It's 1981. I had these full ride scholarships. I went up with Gable. Gable said, "Hey, Paul, we want you here, but at your weight class, just a year or 2 older than you, we have Barry Davis, Mark Trezino, Tim Riley, Jeff Kerber, all these big names, either at 126 or 134, where it looked like I was going to go, or 118. He's like, I want you here. I've been watching you. We'd love to have you. But we can't offer you any money." And then he actually consulted with me on like, "Hey, where else are you looking at?" And he's like, "That's okay. I don't know about that school." But then it was time for me to call my dad because your dad dropped you off on Friday. They picked you up on Sunday. And I called my dad, and my dad said, "How much money are they offering?" And I said, "Well, none, but he really wants me to be a preferred walk-on. He wants me to be part of this program." So my dad's like, "I'll be right up." And I'm like, oh my God. And I've never seen my dad back down from anybody. And I'm like, okay, here comes this Irish man driving 60 minutes to Iowa City from Bettendorf, who thinks his son is deserving of something. Gable didn't have the money available. And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to get ugly. My dad's going to come in because I've seen my dad's temper. And I'm like, how is this going to play out? And I've got other recruits waiting for their dads to show up. And here comes my dad steaming down the hallway. I see him coming from 50 yards away. And I think he's going to undress Gable like, "What do you mean my kid doesn't deserve any money?" And then back then they broke up scholarships. They still do, 20% ride, 40%, 50%. Very few people get full rides unless you're like Spencer Lee. And then my dad runs into Gable face to face. And I'm like, oh shit, this is not going to be good. And then Gable goes, Mr. Glenn, Dan Gable. And my dad melted. He melted. He sat down. He didn't say anything. He's like, "Yes, sir." And Gable's just like, "Hey, we'd love your son to be a Hawkeye. He fits the mode of what we're looking for. He's got the ability. Let's see how he does. And you can earn something as you go." And then, so I forfeited my other recruiting trips and any other ones that might have come. And I'm just like, I'm a Hawkeye. And then Gable came to my house with Chuck Yeaglin. And we still signed a letter of intent, even though it was no scholarship. Hey, I didn't even get books, Pat. I didn't even get anything. But listen, I never felt not part of the team. And, like wrestling, you win your wrestle-off, you win your spot. You don't have to worry about the guy that's on scholarship. So I passed on a lot of things. That was my way into the University of Iowa. To finish the story, Pat, in August of 1981, I did get a job working 22 hours a week cleaning the mats at the University of Iowa wrestling program. So in the morning and the afternoon, I would come single-handedly, take the dust mop, go through 3 sets of mats, sweep the mats, and then clean them with the mop and this disinfectant. So while the wrestlers were putting their shoes on, getting ready, I was cleaning the mat. So you had to like swallow your pride a little bit. And then I would transition to wrestling shoes and my headgear. So I would sweep the streets or clean the mats that we wrestled on. And I got to do that. And then in August of my freshman year, the University of Iowa sends you your university bill. They sent it to 1735 Spruce Hills Drive in Bettendorf, Iowa. My parents got the bill, Pat, and they sent it back to me. So that was my introduction to adulthood. And then I had to go to the Iowa State Bank on Clinton and get a loan. And then I claimed independence like a year or two later so I could get a Pell Grant.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents couldn't claim me anymore as a tax deduction. Um, and I figured it out through working, cleaning mats, getting a loan. So I'm proud of that, though. I think that taught me a lot. And you had to swallow your pride. And I wouldn't change a thing. Money's temporary. Experiences can last forever.
And I figure, look at the bright side, right? Well, there's a lot of bright sides, but
Yeah.
you're probably one of the best mat cleaners around.
Hey, when I go see people doing it now, I'm like, hey, let me show you what you're doing
let
wrong.
me show you how to do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
And with the stories you hear, and there's one in the news right now. Great wrestlers got staph, I think, and now it's septic, like not good.
Oh yeah.
There's always one going on.
And if practice was at 6 a.m., you had to be there at 5 a.m. because it took a while to get through the process. It's a one-man job.
I don't know about you, but I'm always early, like for everything.
It's
that lets me get my head right.
Yep. That's an easy thing, right? Being on time doesn't give you extra credit.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
It just gives me an advantage. Like I met with my boss at 6:30 for breakfast last Friday, but I got to the restaurant at 5:30 in the morning. I was just like, it was a diner. I know they're going to be open.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, you're always early. You beat me here again. I was like, I don't know. I just self-preservation.
I think it's a good thing to do. And, you're setting the bar and you're leading from the front.
And it's a habit, right? In every way, in your whole life. Preparation.
Yeah. You don't want to come in with your hair on fire and not focused. So coming in early gets you centered and gets you in a frame of mind that you can start focusing on what needs to be accomplished.
Agreed. And like for me, it's even more than that. Like I would say it's honor or duty to the person that I'm meeting with, but really it's honor and duty to me.
Yeah.
I'm giving myself every opportunity to do the best I can do. And if I'm showing up late, and a lot of my friends are not a lot because I don't have a lot of friends that are late, but I know a lot of people that are often late.
Yeah.
And I'm not a fan.
It drives me bananas. But it's a controllable. Why wouldn't you just take advantage of the easiest thing in the world?
Amen.
Yeah.
And since we have such a close friend in common, I know you didn't know he wrestled, but John Haller, I've known since first grade.
Yeah.
And in all the time I've known John Haller, over 50 years, I've never known him to be late. Yeah. Not once.
It just doesn't happen, right? And I think strong leaders, I look at the leaders and the coaches, the teachers, the executives that I've been associated with. They're never late, period. Just not. They're not going to introduce chaos in a moment of where they want to show strong leadership. They also don't, it's disrespectful too, right? It's very disrespectful.
I feel that way. People that are late don't see it that way.
Yeah.
Of course, I don't really listen anymore.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of late people in my life.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully none of them are listening.
I was a sales rep selling the medical devices in Eastern Iowa and Western Illinois. I had a large territory, like 1 hour from one end of the territory to the other could be 6 or 7 hours, right? 3 hours east, 3 hours west, 3 hours south, 3 hours north.
This was early in your career?
This is in my 20s and 30s. And one time out of all the snow, there's not a lot of traffic in Iowa, but you could be a wreck on the highway. There was one time that I showed up late, and I remember it to this day. Customer would not remember it necessarily because it wasn't a habit, but it was one time out of 11 years. So whatever 250 working days out of 2,500 days. It was one time, but it was a controllable that I screwed up on my own end. I can't make excuses for it, but it didn't bite me in the butt, but it's weirdly a memory I have. I know what hospital it was. It was Fort Madison, Iowa. I know what surgery it was, and I know why I was late.
That's impressive.
Well, it would have been more impressive. It would have been 0.
But,
Yeah.
I was talking to someone within the last hour about, any movie, any book, there has to be a hero's journey. So you have to have like one blemish so that you can never do it again.
There's been blemishes. Yeah, you're not perfect. Yeah, for sure. Hey, in my career at Iowa, I had one time where I was late.
Once.
It should have been 0.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you the story if you want it.
Sure.
It was there's no way Gable would remember this. If he would, I would be impressed. But it was our sophomore year, which weirdly back then you couldn't redshirt as a freshman, but you could redshirt once you got through your freshman year. It was a really goofy time with the redshirt rules. So it was my second year at Iowa. I was a redshirt athlete that year, but you're still going through every practice normally. And you can still wrestle in opens. It was New Year's Eve, and we went out. We had some drinks, and there was a huge snowstorm. And back then, they kicked you out of the dorms for that 1 month during Christmas break. So all the students had to leave the dorms. There's no food or anything. They must have shut down the dorms. And we had to stay off campus. And I didn't have a car. My roommate didn't have a car, but we would usually walk a couple miles to practice or try to get someone that had a car and pick us up. Well, we went out super late, had too many pops, had too many beverages. And we had a 7 a.m. practice, and there was like a blizzard. So, maybe, I don't know, 8 to 10 inches of snow. And, we were like, oh, either practice is going to get called or it's, hey, we're redshirt. They're not going to know. We're not starters. It's cold out. We've got this huge snowstorm. We've got an excuse to say, oh, we couldn't get in because we would have had to walk, which we could have done. We didn't have a car. And anyway, let's say practice was at 7. The phone rings. It's like 7:01, and it's Gable. He's like, where are you? And I'm like, well, we're stuck, with this big snowstorm, whatever. He's like, I'll be right over. And we're like, that's okay. And we ran to the arena. And I don't know what possessed me to think we could skip a practice. Not my finest moment, and very out of character, I may add, but I guess making decisions on New Year's Eve to have too many drinks and then coupled with a snowstorm, we thought we could make an excuse, but that stuck with me. And when we got there, I remember Gable put me on one mat and my roommate on another, and it kind of what we call shark bait, where you're the guy in the middle and you're not leaving, and then okay, whatever, like Mark Trezino, go get him, and then after that, Barry Davis, go get him, and then after that, Tim Riley, go get him, and you're just going sequentially. Probably nothing anybody would remember unless you were me, or unless you were
Mm-hmm.
then you might remember it. I would doubt if Gable would remember that, but
He's got a pretty keen memory.
he does.
I think I told you, it was when I was interviewing him, he talked about you. Do you remember me telling you this?
Yeah.
So the story, for anyone listening, he talked about how he ran into this guy at a Wawa or some kind of a food mart convenience store.
Yeah.
And they were getting a cup of coffee or something. Or no, I'm wrong. It was the weight room. And it was the weight room at the University of Iowa. And this was probably 2 decades ago or something. Yeah. He was no longer coaching, and this kid was ticked off at him and was giving him the cold shoulder. And the kid felt that he had been wronged by the coach. And Dan Coach Gable said, I saw it as an opportunity to try to set it right. And he said this kid had been carrying this around with him for, I don't think it was 20 years. It was like 12 years or something. He said 12 years he's been carrying this hurt around with him. And he said, I thought I could maybe make it right. And I apologized and tried to make it right. And he said, I don't know if it worked or not. And he said, contrast that with Paul Glynn. He said there was a wrestle-off with him and Brad Penrith. And my recollection is that you won the wrestle-off. And it was for the Big Ten tournament. And that Dan had to make a decision. And he said he let Brad wrestle, and Brad won the Big Tens and then won the NCAA championships, which he characterized as unfair to you. But in his mind, I think the ends justify the means. But he said that you were super dignified about it and that he has seen you since, and most recently at a baseball game that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And he just said that you carried no animus about it and that it was just a contrast between two people. And
Yeah.
I think he really admired that about you. And I think he feels bad that he had to make that decision. And even though it turned out, great for the team, and it might have turned out the same if you had wrestled. I don't know. But he said that you had let go of whatever bad feelings.
I think it would have turned out the same no matter how you played it. But
you mean you would have won the NCAAs that year, or the team would have won?
Well, our team would have won for sure. We were a dominant team, and we're actually the team of '86 getting inducted into the Glenn Brand's Iowa Hall of Fame. We had the record that stood from '86 to '97 of the highest point totals, but our team would have won with or without me. The story is you got it 90% right, Pat, but not 100% right.
All right.
To credit Brad Penrith, the year started with me wrestling varsity. And I was a varsity guy. Brad wasn't to start the season. And I think a year earlier, I wrestled Brad off and beat him. But Brad was obviously tough and a 3-time finalist. He was a great teammate. I got injured. So my spot was temporarily on hold while I injured. I had an MCL injury, my medial collateral ligament. Brad then is filling in the second semester and wrestling in the meets. I'm injured. Brad's in. We had not yet wrestled off for that year. And Brad goes undefeated, maybe 6 or 7 or I don't know, 8, 10-0, and I'm undefeated. I come back. Gable says to us, Paul, Brad, hey, do you guys want to wrestle off now? This was January. Or let's see who performs better. And if somebody performs better, we're going to go with the performance. If not, we're going to have a wrestle off before before the season ends. We can only enter one wrestler at the Big Ten tournament. So Brad runs off a string of victories. I run off a string of victories. I wrestled the number 2 and 5 ranked wrestler. We wrestled back-to-back weekends, Iowa versus Penn State. We were 1, Penn State was 2. I grabbed the Penn State guy. I beat him. He was 5th ranked. The next weekend, I get the nod against Iowa State. It's 1 versus 2. Now Iowa State gets ranked number 2, and the opponent I had was Bill Kelly. Bill did win a national title by the time he graduated. At that point in time, Bill is ranked 2nd in the country, and I beat Bill 7-3, so I'm undefeated. And now I elevate up to 3rd in the country. This continues. Brad goes, I go, Brad goes, I go, Brad goes, I go, back and forth. And then we get to the number 1 guy in the country, and I lose to the number 1 guy in the country 6-4.
Who was that?
That was a New Jersey guy from Northwestern named Steve DiPietro. And Steve DiPietro was 5'2" and just built like a fire hydrant. And he beat me at Northwestern 6-4. And then, so here we go. We go to the end of the season, and Gable's got to make a choice. He can give the spot to me. I'm ranked third in the country. Can't rank both wrestlers from Iowa. Brad, I think, might have also at the time, I think he might have been undefeated, but he was filling in and we were going back and forth. So we had to wrestle off. That's fair. That's fair. Nobody should be granted if I was performing better, then of course that would make sense. But Brad was performing excellent. I was performing pretty good. You could have said, well, Paul's a fifth-year senior. You could have said Brad's a sophomore. And at the first part of the semester, Brad wasn't wrestling. And now I remember, we didn't wrestle off because I think Brad was academically ineligible. And you could have said, oh, hey, at the time, Brad might have been a little bit of a partier. True. Brad wasn't necessarily taking care of academics. True. You could have said, well, here's a fifth-year senior doing things right, paid his dues, non-scholarship athlete, behind Barry Davis the other 4 years that Barry won 3 titles. And I'd proven myself to be the guy. And you could have said, hey, a feel-good story might be give the fifth-year senior that. But here's the deal, Pat. It's wrestling. We have a very simple philosophy. Who's better, wrestle off. So at that point in time, Brad and I wrestled a 2 out of 3. One went into overtime where Brad won 1-0, and one match, I think Brad won 4-3. Brad won the spot. So going into the Big Ten tournament, I was ranked third in the country, but did not get to enter into the Big Ten tournament. Ironically, Brad did have one loss that year, Pat, and it was to Bill Kelly, because back then Iowa State did the home and away. And I beat Bill 7-3, and Brad lost to Bill. But then I lost to the number 1 ranked guy, Pat, and here's where it gets fun. But Brad beat the number 1 ranked guy. So think about this. Brad's got 1 loss his senior year to the number 2 ranked guy. I have 1 loss all year to the number 1 ranked guy. But Brad had beaten the number 1 ranked guy, and I had beaten the number 2 ranked guy. So our senior years, we both had 1 loss. He beat the guy that I lost to, and I beat the guy that he lost to. So we're about as dead even as you could get, in the overtime match and the 1-0 match demonstrate that. Brad got the nod. I had a choice to be bitter. I'm not going to let 12 years of wrestling and good experiences. And Brad won. Like, hey, Brad got his hand raised, deservedly so. I didn't get screwed. If I wanted to reflect, I had 5 years under Gable where I could have found a way to get a point better, right? That was on me. That loss is not on. It's credit to Brad. Gable as a coach it was in a conundrum. I mean, everybody knew in the wrestling room we were back and forth. The wrestle-offs showed how close we were.
That must have been the best match of the season to be watching. That match in the room.
I would give at least $10,000 if we could find those 2 matches on tape somewhere.
Oh my gosh.
Somewhere they were recorded, VCR tape in a box somewhere. I'm sure they've gotten thrown out. But wow, because I can't even describe how close those matches were. And in those 2 matches, Brad was a hell of a rider. I won't go through all the matches, but they were as close as those 2 matches on that 2 out of 3 were as close as you could get. And then Brad went on to win the national title. And I think some people, because we had a teammate that was in a similar situation that lost the spot, and he ended up transferring, and he was a good kid, but really wanted to blame the coaches for him losing the spot. And I just don't think that's fair. I don't think you can blame the coaches.
There's a lot of that going on today.
There is. Hey, you can blame the coaches if you're in another sport. If you're in baseball or basketball or football and you think you're getting a raw deal and you're actually better than the starter, but for whatever reason the coach doesn't like you, maybe maybe you're right, maybe you're wrong. In wrestling, um, you just can't blame anybody but
But
yourself.
it's happening even in wrestling. I don't know. These
Yeah,
kids are like, oh, I don't think I can win a title under this coach. And, I mean, I know of a couple that are, listen,
yeah,
I was a partier. I have no excuses for myself. But some of
yeah.
these kids are partiers and this and that, and the coach is reprimanding them, and then they say, "Oh yeah, I can't win under you because you're not."
Hey, you know what I think, Pat? I don't think at all about Dan Gable making a decision to wrestle off.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you had to. That's the wrestling. That's the
Mm-hmm.
wrestling that I grew up in. That's what I loved about wrestling. You didn't have to
Mm.
worry about politics or whatever. So I say kudos, Coach Gable. Kudos, Brad Penrith. Thank you, Brad, for winning nationals because I would have been pissed if you didn't because then I would always be thinking, put me in,
Mm-hmm.
Um, so thank you for winning that, Bradley. I don't think about that. I think about the match a lot, but I look at it in terms of this. Holy crap, shame on me. I had 5 years there to figure out how to get 1 point better.
Right.
Um,
That was a great line. I wrote that down.
you know, and and uh, and don't you think I can mentally conceptualize? Holy crap! There's a lot that there's a lot that I'm proud of. Anybody that went through that program, anyone that went 5 years through Coach Gable, Coach Jay Robinson, Coach Mark Johnson, Keith Morlum, Chuck Yagla, anybody that went through that program for 5 years, badge of honor. Also, I don't care if you were four string. If you went to those practices and you committed to those efforts that we had, I think you should get a gold star. But I had a zillion opportunities to do better, to be more invested, to take less shortcuts. I mean, there's a thousand things I can think of that could have closed the gap. Having a little bit more confidence in myself my first year or second year or third year. Hey, what if I wouldn't have skipped that practice on New Year's?
Mm.
Right?
That was probably the difference right there. That one practice.
Maybe that. See, I made a bad decision. But no, I mean, so I think sometimes Dan will say, um, hey, I don't know if I made the right decision. I'm like, well, first of all, don't tell me that now, 40 years later. But honestly,
I
Dan,
think the point was it was a silver lining. He was saying you're a happy guy. Whether
yeah,
you made the right decision or not, you didn't
yeah,
you didn't carry that around with you.
yeah. And he
It
made the
was
right decision. I
was
mean,
a
I would have been mad at him, hey, look it. If the decision went the other way, Brad could be going for the rest of his life like, hey, I got screwed. Like they picked the 5th-year senior. Why didn't we wrestle off? Right.
mm,
And that would be a black eye for the sport of wrestling,
mm-hmm.
in my opinion, because the sport of wrestling, we don't have to debate who's better. We just get on the mat and go a match and we'll find out who's better. So it's all good. And, you know, all 5 years when I was at Iowa, we won 5 national titles,
That's great.
which was amazing. In '84, we had 4 of our teammates made the Olympics. 3 won gold, 1 won silver. Hey, no shade on Penn State because Penn State is we're all shooting for what Penn State is right now. All of us are. Every program in America is trying to do what Cale Sanderson is doing. But let's not forget that in the '80s and '90s, um, Gable was doing things and maybe even more dominantly than what Penn State has right now, right? So um, we had Olympians and Olympic gold medalists coming from the program. So I'm just poking Penn State a little bit to get some Olympic champions, Like come join us. I'm just joking. We don't need to poke Penn State. They're doing just fine.
They're probably coming.
Yeah.
I think they're coming.
We don't need to give them any incentive. We're gonna track them down and do our best to dethrone them. That's the goal.
So how about your career at Stryker? You come out of college.
Yeah. Probably like most kids out of college, you don't know exactly what you're going to do unless you're going to go being a coach or a teacher. And in the 80s, that wasn't just a great option. I was a coach and teaching major for a while, but it was the 80s. The economy was bad. My teachers and coaches were telling me not to go into teaching because they were all doing side jobs like mowing lawns and tending bar on top of that because interest rates were like 17, 18%. But so I became a business major, got into sales. First 4 years out of sales was like consumer product sales, but I found Stryker. Everybody said that if you're going to sell, medical technology is what you want to do. You're in surgery every day. Try to build a resume. And then at 28 years old, in 1991, I got hired by Stryker back in my hometown of Bettendorf, Iowa, as a sales rep in 1981 or 1991. Sorry, and that was a
And then,
great experience.
mm, so how do you feel like about sales people? Like, how should they approach the business of sales? Like,
Yeah,
what made you great at sales? What what did wrestling or your
yeah.
personal characteristics? What characteristics helped you
Look, I mean,
to
there's so
be
many
great?
parallels. I wouldn't say I'm great. Um, that's for history to decide. But I know I'm good enough at it that I do some things right. I think there's lots of parallels, and here are the parallels. Um, you've got to learn your product, which to me is technique, right? Wrestling is technique. You got to learn your craft. If you're very knowledgeable on your craft, so your technique and knowledge, just replace technique by knowledge, right? Um, in the wrestling world is technique, in the business world is knowledge. If you invest in your own trade, you're going to get dangerously good and confident because you know your product. Secondly, is hard work transfers, right? The person that gets up in the morning and it's snowing out and you decide to drive through the snow and go see customers, and no matter what, put the time that it takes. So if it's 5 p.m., 7 p.m., 9 p.m., and cases are going longer, work ethic translates tremendously. So two things translate universally. Work ethic translates, and product knowledge is the same as going and drilling your skill. Drill, 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 learn your product. Those two things I can do very well. The third thing that isn't necessarily tied to athletics per se is likability. Um, you could be an athlete that's just not a fun teammate, but you could be maybe so great at it that your personality doesn't take away from your ability to go hit the fastball, right? Ty Cobb was a jerk, right? Um, so in the world of business and sales, you can't be a bad teammate or a bad human. You can't. Your brand is everything, right? So you got to work on that likability. So if you're an athlete and you can work hard and you can learn your craft and the technique that you need or the knowledge that you need, and you're pretty good socially, now sales is really exciting for you because those are the ingredients that you need to be great at. On top of that, sales is a winner and a loser. That's a translation, right? So you have to, this. What drives wrestlers, golfers, football players, gymnasts is when they win, they get a 10.0 on the balance beam. They win the Friday night football lights game. Winning fuels you. Winning and having a scoreboard and saying, I competed for this football game, this basketball game. They kept score. There was a shot clock. We won. Wow. I'm getting ranked higher. I'm getting accolades. I'm getting awards. I'm winning. Winning feels good. Sales, there's a winner and there's a loser. And when you win, you're hitting your numbers, your salary or your commissions are going up, your bonuses are going up. And there's another person on the other end of that you're competing with that is losing. And it fuels you. It's similar to sports. There's a winner, there's a loser. There's consequences to winning, there's consequences to losing. And sales fills those consequences up in a very brutal way if you lose. But if you win, it also fills your cup up, right? Not all jobs, professional jobs, do you feel there's a winner and a loser every day or every week or every month, nor do they keep score in all professions the way they do sales. I think that's why a lot of athletes do very well at sales, Pat, is because there's winning and there's losing, there's scoreboards, there's consequences, and work ethic and drive still come into play to a large degree. So that's a little, thoughts from my chair.
Interesting. I feel like for me, like those contributions that you talk about, you were late for a practice. I mean, on the radar screen of eternity, that's a relatively small number. One practice missed or being
Yeah,
late. And I feel like all the contributions, like the consistency of being on time and having it be a habit, to me, that's all like potential energy. It's just going in, going in, going in, going in. And it's just part of, I call it my opus, my life's work.
sure.
It's part of who I am. And fundamentally, there's so much knowledge and so much ability to withstand discomfort over such a long period of time that it's not that I don't mind the discomfort, because I do mind it, but I'm used to it.
Yeah,
And I can tolerate anything for an hour. So
yeah,
then I do it for an hour. And guess what? I can tolerate it for another hour. And before you know it, you're in the gym at Iowa and you're tolerating another hour. Or the metaphor, you're in sales for Stryker and it's snowing and you're tired and maybe you have young kids and you don't want to go out in the snow, but you
yeah.
have a duty to yourself and to the doctors and to the patients. And canceling isn't an option.
It's not.
You're going
Yeah.
to go.
No.
And that's
For
another
sure.
contribution and
Yeah.
another and another and another. Covey calls it braiding the rope in the
Mm-hmm.
7 Habits. And he
Yeah.
says, at some point, the rope is so strong, it is unbreakable.
Yeah. I
And
love that. No, that's fantastic. And I think the two things that I'm passionate about today is leadership or maybe the void that we have in leaders potentially, because leaders owe it to their teams to create an environment that is healthy, welcoming, developing, caring, um, but more than anything, like help pave the way and show them the way. Uh, Leadership matters tremendously, and then the other thing would be brand, right? Like everybody's got to understand their personal brand, and when you graduate, you really have to understand that everything that you do will determine your brand. In other words, your reputation, or how customers look at you, or how clients look at you, how your teammates look at you, how your marketing team looks at you. Is what are you doing to enhance your brand? And you know that your brand is always in focus when you're in work mode. You have to understand that. And then, my goodness, like I sold for 11 years for Stryker. I still say I sell for Stryker for now 34 years, right? It just went to regional sales manager, which I think is the most important role, to a Western sales director, to the vice president of North America for Stryker. But man, when you are a medical device rep, Pat, and you go into a hospital, medical device selling is unique, Pat, in the sense that you do your selling in the operating room. And you don't do it by like actively trying to sell like a feature and a benefit. You do it by servicing and introducing technology and being present. And for those, you might stand in cases 8 hours a day and do 12 procedures. The nurses and doctors are looking at you. What's your attitude? What's your intelligence or your knowledge? Are you lowering our blood pressure? Are you raising it? But to me, Pat, when you walk into Carver Hawkeye Arena in street clothes like I'm dressed, and you went in the locker room and you put your headgear on, you put your shoes on, and you opened up that locker room, you went into the mat, it was go time. It was focused. It was, now we're competing. When you walk into a hospital with a suit on and you go to the changing room and you put on scrubs and you walk into the operating room, it is go time. It is serious. There's a patient on the table. Your products are going to be used. Your knowledge is needed. It's just translates it to me the same as it did as putting on that headgear going into locker room to wrestling room, locker room to the operating room. So many parallels are there, and you have a chance to make a difference, and you have a chance to get better. And there's a patient on the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
How cool is that? That you're actually bringing technology that's being used on a patient to make healthcare better.
No doubt.
That's
And
pretty
like
amazing.
for me, it's like little things. Like I forget who said it. I think it was Ben Carson. He was talking about how he studied classical music when he lived in the ghetto
Yeah,
in Detroit, and people would denigrate him. They'd say that music is not culturally relevant to you. You know, his friends maybe. I don't really know who denigrated him,
right.
but then he was trying to get the pediatric oncology residency or fellowship at Johns Hopkins, and or pediatric neurosurgery. And there were 3 spots, and there were 600 applicants or something. And the guy who's interviewing him happens to be the head of the department, and so it was a pretty short list, I think. And the guy said, do you have any hobbies? And he said, well, I do this and that, but my real passion is classical music. And the guy says, really? And he said, tell me all about it. And so Dr. Carson tells him all about it. And he said, that's funny. I love classical music too. And he starts talking about how he loves classical music. And Ben Carson says in his book, Gifted Hands, if you haven't read it, it's really good.
I'm
He
not.
says, what do you think the odds are that I would have gotten that job if not for the classical music connection? He said, maybe I would have gotten it, but no knowledge is wasted knowledge. And that's a perfect example. And I feel like, when I was, and I still do it, I always carry things to read, but I usually carry a paperback book. Right now it's In the Heart of the Sea by Nathaniel Philbrick. If you've never read it, it's the sort of historical biography, or it's fiction, but it's based on the account of the sinking of the whale ship Essex, which is the boat that Moby Dick is based on.
Yeah.
And so what I do is I buy a used copy on like Amazon or something for like $2. And then every time I'm in a doctor's waiting room or in a customer's reception area or whatever, I read a few pages of it, and I rip the pages out of the book and I throw them away. And so over the course of like a month, I'll read an entire book just because I'm in someone's waiting area. That's how much time. I could be on my phone. I could be playing a game. I could be doing something meaningless, but I'm trying to always learn something.
Yeah. You're gaining knowledge.
And then I can talk to someone like yourself about it. I'm telling a story about the very thing I do, and I'm talking about Dr. Ben Carson.
Yeah.
And I can talk to you about the whale ship Essex and all the crazy things that happen in that book. If you haven't read it, it's so good. I've asked you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions that you might like to ask me, or do you have any comments or thoughts before we wrap up?
Yeah. I mean, just generally speaking, Pat, number one, thank you. It's always fun to talk about life, leadership, maybe a few lessons. Just maybe a comment to the young folks out there is just like, I really believe that everybody's future can be as bright as they want it to be, right? I like to say, let's make the good old days tomorrow, not yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And those are choices. understand the word brand and what your brand is, um, because that's something you can build towards. And no matter where you're starting, we're all going to start at level one. And in order to get to level two and level up and keep going, um, you're either adding to your brand and your resume, and it's the little things, not the big things, that usually come into play. So just understand that, and your brand is always on in play, right? It's not just in play when you're in the operating room. It's in play when you're in the cafeteria. It's in play when you're with the parking lot attendant and how you treat people. Um, Doing the right things isn't hard. Doing the right things consistently is going to make for a better life. And then if for the leaders out there, and you don't have to have a title to be a leader, but just invest in the people under that are coming up and that you have the responsibility to lead. So your team, um, are you making your team better? Simple question. If you are, tell me how. If you aren't, tell me what's preventing you from doing that. Because if we all take a responsibility, father, mother, teacher, lawyer, sales professional, and we really care to give back, by developing and teaching, grooming, growing, then the world's going to be just fine. So those would just be some comments like care. My brother Dave, who's no longer living, he's one of my siblings, used to have a saying that said, just care. Care about everybody, care about everything. And that's a pretty good philosophy to lead by. I'll turn it back to you, Pat. You get to do these. What do you like doing these podcasts? Who are you doing them for? Are you doing them for your to feed you energy? Are you doing it for the people? What keeps you motivated to do these podcasts?
Um, I watched a lot of podcasts and still do. I like to watch Joe Rogan and,
Yeah.
to a lesser extent, Tim Ferriss and some others. And I felt like that the better, bigger podcasters are starting to make the podcasts about themselves a lot. And I I'm not like terribly offended by it. I just don't think it's effective as an interview style. And in addition to that, only interviewing famous people, I guess it's great to build a platform and a business, but I think everyone's fascinating. And that's the title of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like if you have listened to the intro, it says anybody who's ever done anything worthwhile has struggled, often from modest means. And so that's what the intro is to this podcast. And to me, I could say I'm doing it for the world and it's some benevolent thing and all this stuff. But if I'm honest, I'm a selfish person and I'm doing it for myself. But that doesn't mean it's not good for other people.
Right.
I mean, it's fun for you to be interviewed. It's fun for me to interview you. And for some people, it's fun for them to listen to it. And there's just my belief is there's a 5-year-old child that lives inside me and everyone else.
Yeah.
And in my case, that child just wanted to matter. And I feel like everyone wants to matter.
You
And
bet.
I want them to tell me their story. And to the extent that that's fun for them and me, I think it's great. And to the extent that someone else listens to that story, I think it's great too. And I feel like there's so much negativity in the world. Like, I'm not an investigative reporter. I'm not trying to make people look bad or question their integrity or anything like that. I'm trying to champion the human being. And to your point about leadership, leadership comes in a lot of different forms. It could be like, I remember custodians at my high school
100%.
that were leaders, and this book I just read, in the Heart of the Sea, Captain Pollard, who lost not one, but 2 whale ships and suffered terribly. And there was cannibalism and all kinds of stuff. And he was kind of maligned by his community. He was responsible for the death of his nephew and had to deal with his wife's sister and it was unavoidable, and it was
Right.
not unethical or anything like that. But he had to go back to his community in Nantucket, and he became a night watchman. And the author, Nathaniel Philbrick, talks about how, in his own way, he became a leader in his community. He would watch out for the poor kids, and there's a big Black community in Nantucket, and the Quakers prided themselves on having um, offering a lot of opportunity to Black people. But there was a lot of kids in trouble still in Nantucket, and he was a night watchman. He would like try to help these kids and be a father figure to them.
Yeah.
And I thought that's such a nice little observation of what's possible, even though in many ways, many people, their lives would have been ruined.
For
They lost,
sure.
one whale ship and then lost another. And, a lot of people ridiculed him, and there were, very harsh rumors and this and that. And I mean, harsh beyond belief.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to be a happy person. And like, I feel like one of the greatest messages, the reason I brought up the thing about you and Gable and the one guy who was bitter, and the fact that you're not bitter, is I think we can all go down whatever fork we want to go down. There's going to be a fork in the road today and tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And, I was kind of an unhappy kid. And at some point I decided to be happy. and, and, I went in a direction that I always thought I wanted easy life. And I always thought I wanted to party and drink and not work and lay on a beach and have a pina colada or an umbrella in my drink or my lime in my beer. And in essence, I got both. I
Sure.
got what I thought I wanted. And when I got it, I realized that that's not what I wanted. And
Yeah.
I had the benefit of wrestling and track and cross country and college athletics, not at the level that you did, but, in my own way. And I never learned the lesson. But until I was a young adult. And then I realized at some point that I could be happy doing the work, and that I was happiest doing the work. And paradoxically, I think the harder the work, the happier I got. And
Interesting.
to your
Yeah.
point about anybody who can get through 5 years of Iowa practices and matches, it's like being a Navy SEAL, or maybe harder. I don't know.
I mean, we kind of think so. I mean, without the guns and the reality of making that, but no, the training, it is SEAL-esque. I mean, if a SEAL went through 5 years of Iowa wrestling, they might say that was even harder, but not life and death situations that they faced. But it was a challenge for sure. One last question, then we'll cut this off. What is Union 1923 behind you?
I think I mentioned I went to Union College. My grandmother worked there. My mother's mother, who got off a boat from Ireland in the early 19 teens with her sister, and from Ireland, as I say, and Tipperary. And they worked at Union College as chambermaids as a 15 and 16-year-old.
Oh, wow.
And my
Okay.
understanding is Union College housed them because their extended family could not afford to house them. And then they would go home on the weekends to Troy or Albany and, be with the family, and then go back to Union. So I eventually went there to college. My mother worked there after her mother worked there. And then Joe DeMio, if you're familiar with, he was the Greco-Roman coach of the Olympic
Yeah.
team and
Yeah.
world team. I was
Was it?
not a great wrestler, but that room at Union College generated 8 or 10 world and Olympic team members and
Wow.
numerous Pan Am game winners and so on and so forth. Jeff Blatnick being the most notable,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for
but
course. Yeah.
Andy Saris, Ike Anderson, Sean Sheldon, and
Wow.
I don't know everyone's name,
Is it
but
is it is that the year that Union was formed?
no,
19
1795. I just
what's
bought this at a garage sale along the way, and I loved it. So,
I love it. Well, I
so
appreciate your time today. Thanks for the opportunity to have a few words in a conversation with you.
me too. It's been delightful, and I look forward to talking with you again.
Okay, Pat. I appreciate you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Thank you. All
Bye,
right.
Paul.
Bye.
You're the best. If you enjoy the most fascinating podcast in the world, please follow on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, and follow on Apple Podcast.